If it's Wednesday, the stage is set for a 2020 proxy war in the biggest battleground state of them all. Good evening, I'm Chuck Todd here in Washington. Of course, my heart's always in the state of Florida, and that's where we're going to begin MTP tonight. We begin with a Trump clone battling an anti-Trump progressive in the ultimate proxy battle for 2020. I'm talking about the Florida gubernatorial race that you had between Republican Ron DeSantis and Democrat Andrew Gillum. Already, this fight is off to a nasty start, just as you'd expect from a proxy battle for 2020 and the Trump era. On day one of this contest, DeSantis made comments attacking Gillum that Gillum and his supporters are calling a racial dog whistle.
The last thing we need to do is to monkey this up by trying to embrace a socialist agenda with huge tax increases and bankrupting the state.
It's very clear that Mr. DeSantis is taking a page directly from the campaign manual of Donald Trump. In the handbook of Donald Trump, they no longer do whistle calls. They're now using full bullhorns.
So there you go. We'll have more on these comments and their fallout in just a moment. I'm also going to speak with Mr. Gillum later in the show. But, folks, there's a reason this November's Florida governor's race, which delivered some shocking results in last night's primary contest, is going to be viewed as the ultimate proxy battle for 2020 nationwide. As that clip indicates, this is going to be a knockdown, drag-out fight between two candidates who essentially are the ultimate proxies for the national party bases because they forged their campaigns with national Trump-focused messages. And it's all happening in a state that is the ultimate proxy for presidential politics. Florida, Florida, Florida. Republican voters picked the Trump-endorsed candidate, Ron DeSantis, by a convincing 20-point margin. DeSantis ran a campaign with the help of what you might call the Fox Pack. Fox News booked him, we're not joking here, wait for it, 121 times. You're looking at just a few of those instances. This is after he was a candidate. According to the Washington Post, DeSantis' campaign estimates that all those appearances basically gave them $9.3 million of free Florida Republican primary airtime. The Democrat, Andrew Gillum, pulled off a shocker last night by toppling the establishment favorite Gwen Graham, who had deep political roots in the state. Gillum ran on impeaching Trump. He also ran on abolishing ICE and Medicare for All. He was backed by pro-impeachment billionaire funder Tom Steyer, Bernie Sanders, and the right's favorite financial boogeyman, George Soros. Folks, his nomination will be viewed by many as the ultimate test for the electability of progressive Democrats nationally at a moment when the Democratic Party leaders seem wary about the electability of said progressives. And as I mentioned, this fight is already off to a nasty start. Fox News, by the way, read a statement on air saying they don't condone what their frequent guest Ron DeSantis said about urging Florida voters not to, quote, monkey this up by electing Gillum. But the DeSantis campaign is arguing that any attempt to characterize his comments as anything but a critique of Gillum's policies is, quote, absurd. I'm joined by the expert these days in Florida politics, none other than Politico's Mark Caputo. He joins tonight's panel of Mark Murray, NBC News senior politics editor, Donna Edwards, former congresswoman from the great state of Maryland, and Michael Steele, an MSNBC political analyst, and, of course, a former RNC chair. Welcome all. Mr. Caputo, wow.
Mr. Todd.
Man, oh, man, you guys delivered the final major primary night of the season, and Florida delivers the big shocker. Is it fair to say that both parties picked candidates that the other party says is unelectable?
Yeah, both sides are really high-fiving, and they think the other guy's going to kind of be easy meat. I'd suggest that we're really in uncharted territory here. Not only did Donald Trump upend conventional wisdom, but Florida voters did it again by picking Andrew Gillum. You have kind of the deepest blue progressive against the reddest Trump conservative. And forecasting what's going to happen in this race is really difficult. You know, depending on who you talk to, Republicans either elated because they think that Gillum, pardon me, is just going to fall and he's going to be easy meat. And the Democrats think that DeSantis is kind of a bit of a paper tiger, that he doesn't have much substance behind him. But really, if you scratch the surface, there's a tremendous amount of Republican enthusiasm that we saw in the primary yesterday. They had kind of record turnout, and so did the Democrats. And so kind of trying to figure out who's going to get an edge in this very intense and hyper-emotional atmosphere is difficult.
Did Gillum win, or did the field just kill Graham?
You know, it might be a little bit of everything, but in the end, especially down here in Miami, Miami-Dade, Broward, Duval County, these large urban counties delivered Andrew Gillum really big margins. And in Miami, when you walked around, you talked to people who were Democrats, a lot of them really loved Gillum. In fact, the only thing that was kind of holding them back when you talk to them is they would say, oh, I don't want to waste my vote. Like they wanted their vote to count. And
They
what
didn't
I
think he
think
could win
Gillum
the
was able to-
nomination? They didn't at the time? That was the assumption?
There was one of two things. Either they weren't sure if he could win the nomination, or they just didn't think he could win the primary. And so when I usually tell people, like, look, vote for the person you like, people would say, oh, well, then I'm probably going to vote for Gillum. And I think you saw that calculus happening across the state. And this really came as kind of a shock to all of us. The polling just did not pick up this sort of movement and these sort of margins that he was able to roll up in these big urban counties.
Now, there's definitely, there was some evidence of a surge, but I'll admit I was skeptical because there hadn't been a history of African-American voters spiking in turnout in a Democratic primary in Florida in the past. So it did upend conventional wisdom.
Well, there hasn't been an African-American candidate like Andrew Gillum. And he really spoke. Yeah, I mean, he really spoke to the party. Understand, the party here in Florida has had 5 white centrist Democrats who have run for governor. And always, it's like, oh, all we have to do is win the middle. Yes. Republicans, though, say, hey, look, we're going to win the base. Winds up being Republicans who win. So it looks like Democrats might be taking a page from their playbook. All
right, Mark Murray, it feels like Andrew Gillum's victory says a lot more about 2020 Democratic primary politics. What did you learn from it?
Yeah, actually, you need to go bold if you want to be able to win. And again, it's important to note that Andrew Gillum ended up getting 34% to Gwen Graham's 31%. It wasn't like it was a huge margin, but the winning percentage was getting about a third of the vote. But the Democratic strategists that I spoke with, particularly who worked on the 2016 campaign for Hillary Clinton, ended up saying our big lesson was we need to actually stake out those bold colors. If we're talking about immigration, yes, we need to abolish and reform ICE. Yes, we need to talk about impeachment. And if you're kind of a Gwen Graham stuck in the middle, you're not going to get the kind of benefit from a lot of voters. And so in this Trump era, going bold is what a lot of people see as the path of 2020.
You know what I love about having both of you here is that both of you have run for office. Both of you have had to walk that line between pleasing primary voters and trying to win the middle. You get the conundrum, Donna, that Gwen Graham was in. On that front, because all of the Washington smart set would have said, no, don't do it. Your gender will be enough to get you there. Well, it wasn't.
Well, it wasn't, and I think, you know, another lesson in this race, and I think for Andrew Gillum, is that he decided he was going to run to the ground on issues, and I think that you can get that kind of surge in a turnout when you're energizing people, when they're enthusiastic. Gwen Graham ran a very conventional, middle-of-the-road, low-key campaign, and so she couldn't generate the kind of enthusiasm that Andrew Gillum did, and I think that he's going to take that into November.
In fairness to her, she thought Levine, all these other people were going to split that activist vote.
Yeah, she did. And I think the Congresswoman was right about how these campaigns set themselves up. But here's the rub. This is a primary. Now, Gillum, who has talked about, you know, giving away a whole lot of free stuff, as the progressive candidates around the country have begun to do, has to translate that into a state that is, despite what you may think of this win, is still center-right on a good day.
I was just going to say, Mark Caputo, you know, this is still a state that doesn't like to pay taxes.
Right.
You know, I know you and I are trying to figure out, okay, with no income tax, how would Medicare for All be implemented in the state of Florida, for instance, and things like this. I mean, this is now does the general, though, become about that at all? Or does Ron DeSantis say, you know what, I got here on the Trump train, I'm going to stick to the culture issues, I'm not going to bother with that?
I think both candidates, when they came out of the primary, had an advantage of not being defined too much. So you might, for instance, see Ron DeSantis flip the script and run as the environmental conservative who took on Big Sugar. So don't underestimate their ability to be kind of elastic. Now, in Gillum's case, he has staked out far more positions. And I think maybe a way to recast your question is, can a Democrat, if he got elected, pass any of these plans in a Republican legislature, like Florida's legislature? The answer to that is no. These guys wouldn't even take, quote-unquote, free money to expand Medicaid when the entire business lobby and all the polling showed it would be a good idea. So the idea that suddenly you'd have kind of Medicaid for all, so to speak, or Medicare for all, is a little difficult to see happening in this state.
All right, I'm going to talk about the DeSantis monkey comment here in a minute. Why didn't he get the benefit of the doubt, Michael?
Why didn't DeSantis get the benefit of the doubt?
The assumption was that he didn't misspeak, that it was 100% a racial dog whistle? What,
Why?
is it because he's connected to Trump? He didn't get the benefit of the doubt from many people, including Fox
because
News.
he's connected to Trump. It's because it's how white folks talk about black men who are successful.
Let's hear the whole thing, just so people can hear it. I think it's important, because I want to hear, do we have the part of, I hope we have yeah, we have a longer version of the bite that gets at exactly what you're saying here. Here it is.
You know, he is an articulate spokesman for those far left views, and he's a charismatic candidate. And, you know, I watched those Democrat debates. None of that was my cup of tea, but I mean, he performed better than the other people there. So we've got to work hard to make sure that we continue Florida going in a good direction. Let's build off the success we've had on Governor Scott. The last thing we need to do is to monkey this up by trying to embrace a socialist agenda with huge tax increases and bankrupting the state. That is not going to work. That's not going to be good for Florida. So I'm going to fight for what I believe in, because I think I'm the guy who can really lead Florida in a good direction.
What'd you hear?
I heard that he's articulate, he performs well, you know, he's checking off those boxes. Why do you have to describe him that way? You know,
What makes him articulate?
yeah, what makes him articulate? Chuck, you are an articulate man. I mean, and, you know, you perform well. Now, that says one thing, but when you...
Doesn't happen to a lot of white candidates.
Doesn't happen to a lot of white candidates, but here's the rub. Who uses the term monkey things up? I mean, to be honest, I know about a monkey wrench. I heard of don't monkey around, but I've never heard that term used that.
So you're not giving him the benefit of the doubt.
No, I'm not, because that came from that space that says, to that audience that he was talking to, that Fox audience, which is why Fox's response is so important.
It's fascinating.
That they pushed back on that, was that this is in the land of Trump. Yeah, I took the train, the Trump train to stupid land, and I'm going in, and here we are.
This is what you get with Trump. You're going to get guilt by association, and you're going to be guilty until proven innocent on some of these.
Well, and I think to Michael's point, monkey things up is not a phrase. Okay, nobody uses this. It's not a phrase, and so I think with every politician, words matter. And you choose your words. And he chose those words, the word articulate. I mean, I know, Michael, you and I, we're so tired of being described as articulate, okay? We went to great schools, and we should be. And so that right there, and then the performance, I mean, you know, he's not a performer. He's running to be governor.
Right.
Andrew Gillum's
by the way, not only that, he's an
state.
actual current elected official.
Right.
That's right.
Mark Caputo, how's that going to play in Florida? I'm trying, if this campaign gets racialized, you know, what happens in Florida?
Well, look at the last election with Trump. You know, he generated a significant amount of controversy for his comments about illegal immigrants, which were widely construed as being not just anti-illegal immigrant, but anti-immigrant, and by many anti-Latino. Well, he dominated in the state, and the white areas of this state, suburban white areas, rural white areas in 2016, came out and voted in force for Donald Trump. There is a belief among a lot of Trump voters that the discussion that we have in the media, you know, the phrase that's just kind of convenient shorthand, is unfair, that they're being victimized for it. Right. And I think you could see kind of a white lash with this, that if this conversation continues on this course, don't be surprised if you start to see Ron DeSantis' support go up with white voters. Because while Florida is an increasingly diverse state, at the same time, we're still adding a lot of white people, especially older, white, conservative retirees. And they don't like this sort of discussion. And when they hear it, they usually wind up flocking toward the Republican, the conservative banner, or at least the anti-progressive side of the aisle.
Republican candidates are not running away from the controversial racial topics. They're sort of running toward it for this midterms, for the most part, aren't they?
They are, but we've seen a lot of the rules that don't seem to apply to President Trump. It's not the same thing when you're another candidate like Ron DeSantis, and you're actually trapped in a scandal that actually it seemed like it's 2015 or 2007. But also, this is a gift to Andrew Gillum. I mean, talk about someone who was able to get name ID after a primary win, and then all of a sudden something like this happens. Name ID matters so much.
Hey, Mark Caputo, before I let you go, Andrew Gillum, you know, there was a theory that Bill Nelson financially really needed Gwen Graham at the top of the ticket. But there's also a theory that says, boy, Andrew Gillum could really get the base out, maybe whether he can win or not. So does Bill Nelson a happier man today or not?
Oh, I would think Bill Nelson has a skip in his step, not just because Andrew Gillum is out there, and Andrew Gillum has shown he can juice the black vote. He gets high margins. He gets a big turnout. But so does a guy named Sean Shaw. Who's that? He is the first Florida Democratic official who is running as the Attorney General nominee. So you've got two historic African-American picks on the Democratic ticket. That's really good for Bill Nelson. It's really good for Democrats running statewide.
And you made the Algie Bloom nugget. St. Lucie County, Rick Scott did worse there than any, Martin County, excuse me, where the Algie Bloom is worse, is the worst.
Right. Well, Martin County has been particularly hard hit by the toxic algae scandal, or the poisoning. And what we saw is that Rick Scott was running against an unknown Republican who just runs all the time, Rocky De La Fuente. It turns out Rocky De La Fuente got 190,000 votes statewide, even though no money was spent. And 20% of the vote, the Republican vote in Martin County, went to Rocky. And a lot of people are looking at that result, and it certainly looks like a lot of that is kind of toxic algae related.
Interesting. It was something to watch for in that state. It is unique to Florida, not the nationalized climate that we're all talking here. Mark Caputo, always fun to talk with you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be reading you every morning in Politico. All right, panel, you guys have to stick around. Up ahead, though, it's the Democrat who pulled off that surprise upset in Florida last night, the newly minted gubernatorial nominee, Andrew Gillum, will be here next. Welcome back. As we mentioned earlier, Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum won a big upset victory in the Florida Democratic gubernatorial primary. The stakes for progressives couldn't be higher. Gillum is their chance to show that a progressive message can win in the swingiest of swing states. And Gillum would make history if elected in November. He would become Florida's first African-American governor. And the mayor of Tallahassee joins you now. Mayor Gillum, welcome to Meet the Press Daily.
What's up, Chuck? Go Canes, man.
I was going to ask you that at the end. You're a guy that's been in Miami, lived in Gainesville, and mayor of Tallahassee. I assume it better be Rattlers first. Right?
Well, it's always Rattlers first.
There
Let's
you
be
go,
clear
the green and
about
orange.
that.
The other green, the way I looked at it, the other green and orange in the state of Florida.
That's exactly right, man. But we love all our Florida schools.
All right, let me start with the controversy today by your opponent, Congressman Ron DeSantis. You heard something that you said, it was a page from the Donald Trump campaign manual. Do you want an apology from Congressman DeSantis? Do you think you're owed one?
You know, let me be articulate and clear here, which is we're better than this in Florida. I believe the congressman can be better than this. I regret that his mentor in politics is Donald Trump. But I do believe that the voters of the state of Florida are going to reject the politics of division. They believe that we're better than that, which is why I'm going to spend my time over the next 2+ months getting around this state, talking about the issues that matter to everyday voters in this state. Kitchen table issues, health care, education, making sure we clean up our environment, which our governor has been derelict with the Republican legislature to do. And I think that's how we're going to win in November. But it's clear that the congressman is going to join Donald Trump in the swamp. We're going to leave them there, and we're going to continue to press toward a higher mark.
All right, but let me ask you this. You talked about you were going to travel the state, talk about kitchen table issues. But for what it's worth, you've tweeted about the president 10 times this month. You pointed out the last Democratic debate, you were the only candidate who called for impeaching the president. That's fine, except you're running for governor. What are you going to do as governor to stop Donald Trump? Like, why do you believe staking out an impeachment position in a gubernatorial race is relevant to the voters in the state of Florida?
Well, I should first say, I mean, the president self-admitted that he obstructed justice by firing Jim Comey because he wouldn't do his bidding. Those were his words. And I believe that the president, for those reasons, has bargained himself into conversation around impeachment. I will tell you, though, it does matter what the governor of the state of Florida thinks. It matters that the governor of the state of Florida works every day to push back against the kind of divisive rhetoric that this administration has been increasingly reliant on as a way to divide this country and to divide my state, quite frankly. We're one of the most diverse states in all of America. It matters that the governor of this state is willing to stand up and say, do you want to know something? In the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, you owe the people of Puerto Rico, U.S. citizens, better than how you've treated them. And because so many of them now call Florida home, they need to know that I'm going to be a governor who stands up for them. Or if you're from Haiti or you have family who lives in Haiti, that it matters to you what the President of the United States has to say about that, and you want to know that your governor is going to stand up on your behalf.
The governor of Florida's got to work with the President of the United States, no matter the party and no matter what they think of him. Florida's too big of a state to essentially not end up interacting with the federal government. Not going to be easy to work with somebody you want to see impeached from office. How would that work?
Well, I'll tell you, first off, I wish that our current governor had taken that advice, right, in the Republican legislature. We had an opportunity to expand Medicaid for over 700,000 of the most medically needy people in this state, and we said no, leaving $6 billion alone in last year's budget on the table at the federal government to be distributed elsewise. Barack Obama tried to send us more than $2 billion to build high-speed rail across the I-4 corridor, and we said no, thank you. That was not actions taken, in my opinion, in the best interest of the people of the state of Florida. So current administration has, in my opinion, acted contrary to what's in the best interest of the people of this state. I can guarantee you this. If Donald Trump wants to send us money to build a high-speed rail, we're going to build a high-speed rail because it's in the best interest of the people of the state of Florida. That does not remove my sentiments around how uniquely unqualified I find him as the president and the great trouble that he now finds himself and that he's created for himself. But that being said, I know that we're going to win this race largely by talking about how it is we pay teachers more, how we make healthcare more accessible and affordable. That's what I've been talking about in the primary, and that's what I think is going to carry us over on November 6th.
You heard Mark Caputo say it. Me as a longtime Floridian, I've seen it. You can have all the plans in the world as governor, but if you don't have a legislature that's going to go along with you, you're going to be issuing a lot of press releases, doing a lot of speeches, and maybe issuing a lot of vetoes. But you're not going to be able to get some of these plans forward. What's the reality here? What's the straight talk to voters here?
Yeah, no, and I think that's fair. While I may have strong divides on various issues with various members of the Republican Party, I do think that there are some areas wherein we can find cooperation. I think criminal justice reform is one of them. Under Republican Senate and House, we actually saw some bills come through the legislature that may have been able to aid in some of the reform. For instance, in Florida, about 60% of people that are sitting in jails around this state are there without ever having been found guilty of a crime. It's costing this state $880 million roughly a year. I think Democrats and Republicans who want to save money, who want to be more fiscally responsible, I think we can work together to find those solutions. But I will be clear. I will use the tools of the office of the governor to help to compel the legislature to do the right thing by the people of our state.
How are you going to pay for some of these programs? Let me ask it this way. Do you think the state of Florida needs an income tax?
No. What I propose, largely because I think everyday people are paying their fair share in this state.
So you would never propose a state income tax?
I would not propose a state income tax under my administration. I'm proposing, however, that corporations do pay their fair share. The corporate tax rate in the state of Florida is less than that of Alabama and Georgia, our neighboring states. We have for too long believed that the way the state of Florida grows a vibrant economy is by being a cheap date. But being a cheap date has not worked for us. We have 44% of the people in this state say that they cannot make ends meet at the end of the month. Many of them working harder than ever and still can't pull down a wage where they can take care of themselves and their families. When I talk about building an economy that works in this state, I'm talking about jobs that pay good wages. I'm talking about jobs that have health benefits, allow people to make enough where they can take a vacation maybe once a year. That shouldn't be too much to ask in one of the wealthiest states in this country.
President Trump and I think Ron DeSantis has said the S word when talking about your ideology or your stances, socialist. I think the president used the word socialist today on Twitter. What do you make of the label? Do you accept it? Do you see it as an attack? What do you make of this socialist label that's going to be ascribed to you a lot by your political opponents?
Yeah, well, I mean, it shouldn't surprise you. It doesn't surprise me that the president is, again, creating fairy tales on his Twitter feed.
You do not ascribe to being a socialist?
No, I'm a Democrat. I ran as a Democrat. I am a Democrat. And frankly, the values that I hold, I think, are consistent with the values of the Democratic Party. In fact, I think they are the values shared by the majority of Floridians. What they don't know, overwhelmingly what voters don't know, too often in these elections is where we stand on those positions. I have been unapologetic in my beliefs. I have gone out, and whether I'm in red areas or blue areas or purple areas of this state, I've said the same thing. My grandmother used to put it this way: when you tell the truth all the time, you don't have to worry about covering up for lies. And so I've tried to be consistent every single place I've gone. And I think that's why we made it through this Democratic primary. And I believe that kind of honesty and earnestness, even in places where people don't agree with you 100%, is exactly what's going to allow us to win in November.
Look, speaking of honesty, a lot of your opponents are going to bring up, and media has brought up, this FBI investigation having to do with something with Tallahassee city government. And in fairness, it isn't 100% clear everything about it. You have said you're not a target. What do you tell your support? If there are supporters out there, should your supporters at all be worried about this?
Yeah, no, they shouldn't. I mean, I want my constituents and future constituents to judge me by my record of service. I've been elected 15 years by doing what's right. And in fact, with regard to the FBI investigation, which I don't believe is of our government, but potentially maybe a member in our government,
gotcha.
We have tried to do everything that we can to make ourselves available to aid them in that. There's probably no more person more interested in bringing this thing to conclusion and weeding out any wrongdoing as possible. The difference between me and Ron DeSantis, of course, is that we welcome the FBI to do their job. He and Donald Trump have tried to undermine them at every course, even going so far as to suggest some deep state involvement in the FBI, who are doing important work for this country and this state of Florida. So the difference is that I'm here to aid them in getting their job done. Ron DeSantis and President Trump is here to undermine them.
Do you, final question is, do you embrace the pressure of being the progressive test case here? You're running in the most important battleground state in the country that decides who our presidents are. Somebody as progressive you has never been able to succeed statewide in Florida. You accepting this pressure to prove whether progressives can win swing states?
Well, and you know this, Chuck, from being from down here, you know, the Democrats have lost the last 5 races consecutively for governor. We've lost the last 20 years. There weren't progressives necessarily running. I'm pleased to have the positions that I hold and have the values that I do, because I do believe they are the majority positions of the people of this state. And I believe that our formula for winning this November 6th is going to be that we're going to give voters a reason to come out and vote for something and not just against. We're providing a platform that they can get behind, and I think that's what's going to make me the next governor of the great state of Florida.
Who's going to be your running mate? When are you going to make a decision?
We're not breaking that news today, man.
What are you looking for? Somebody that balances regionally in the state? What are you looking for?
You know what? Most importantly is you want a lieutenant governor who could be governor. And second, I would say, just given the challenges that we may face in the legislature, I want someone who has had some experience potentially working with legislatures, working with members of the legislature. I think that's an important value, and I think that's something I'll be looking forward to considering as I make a choice for an LG.
All right, we'll be scanning the list of people who have been in various legislatures, and I'll just leave it at that. Anyway, Andrew Gillum, the new Democratic nominee in the state of Florida. Thanks for coming on and sharing your views, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate it.
Quick program, you know, we also invited Florida's Republican gubernatorial nominee, Ron DeSantis, on tonight, but his folks told us that he was not available today. We will reach out again soon. Up ahead, White House lawyer Don McGahn is leaving the White House. What could his departure mean for Jeff Sessions and the Russia probe? Welcome back. Arizona is paying its final tribute to longtime Senator John McCain. You're looking live at the Arizona State Capitol in Phoenix. People have been filing past the senator's casket since this afternoon. Family members and state leaders attended a private ceremony earlier today. It was an emotional tribute from Arizona lawmakers, past and present, who remember McCain as their guiding force.
He represented our values all over the world as senator from Arizona, and America is stronger for his fierce defense of our values.
Men had followed John McCain into battle, and we knew we could do the same. This man was trusted, and he was tested. Qualities in increasingly short supply.
Governor Ducey says Senator McCain was Arizona's favorite adopted son, and that imagining the state without him would be like imagining the state without the Grand Canyon. Tomorrow, Senator McCain will leave Arizona for the last time after a funeral service in North Phoenix. He will lie in state at the U.S. Capitol on Friday before his memorial service at the Washington National Cathedral Saturday. And of course, the senator will be buried at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland on Sunday. Some of those events are private. The ones that are public, we will bring to you live right here on MSNBC, and we'll be right back.
Don McGahn's a really good guy. Been with me for a long time. Privately before this, he represented me. He's been here now. It'll be almost 2 years, and a lot of affection for Don.
Welcome back. That was President Trump praising the soon-to-be former White House counsel Don McGahn, who, as the president tweeted today, will be leaving this fall. McGahn's departure has been rumored for months, but this comes less than 2 weeks after the New York Times reported that McGahn cooperated extensively, perhaps even more extensively, in the Mueller investigation than the president was aware of. So we know the White House's top lawyer will be out soon, and now there's renewed speculation the Attorney General could be out soon, too. The Washington Post reports that President Trump privately revived the idea of firing Attorney General Jeff Sessions this month. According to that report, the president's attorneys believe they've convinced him, at least for now, not to fire Sessions while Robert Mueller's investigation is ongoing. Back now with me is the panel: Mark Murray, Donna Edwards, Michael Steele. Donna Edwards, the Don McGahn news, what's interesting is that this is one of those cases where the president decided, instead of to attack the Post for fake news, just confirmed the Post's reporting this morning that Don McGahn is leaving. Should the president be more fearful of Don McGahn in the White House or outside the White House?
Well, I'm not really sure that it matters. I think Don McGahn has already provided his 30 hours, and maybe there's 30 more to come. I think, it's interesting. When the president calls you a really good guy and has a lot of affection for you, wait for the tweet, because you could be fired. And he didn't really fire McGahn, but clearly there was a parting of the ways after Don McGahn provided his testimony, and some of that has leaked out. And I think the president has to be careful, because it seems like everybody who goes and speaks to the special counsel ends up on a hit list.
Mark, Don McGahn has been the guardrail. If anybody, who has been the most important guardrail, if you believe there have been guardrails? Because there's been reports that he threatened to resign when he wanted to fire Mueller once. There's been, apparently, he was forced to ask Sessions to unrecuse himself. He did it. We don't know how enthusiastically or he has been put in positions. He's threatened resignation. And now the guardrail is gone. Does this embolden the president?
The president actually doesn't like the guardrails. I mean, it's pretty clear.
No.
He doesn't like getting advice, doesn't like being told.
He doesn't like the lines in the middle of roads, I think.
Chuck, the job of normally a White House counsel is to say, sir, I'm sorry, you can't do this, or you can do that. And that drives President Trump absolutely crazy on being told what you can do. I will tell you what Don McGahn is very good at, and that's all the judicial nominations. And we saw Senator Chuck Grassley talk about that today. He's like, please keep Don McGahn.
I know.
Great at this. And to me, if you want to take a step back outside of the Mueller investigation, the biggest storyline here is just all the turnover that's actually occurred. And if the White House is already going to be on its second White House counsel, its fourth or fifth communications director, second or third White House press secretary, when you don't have really good people around you, guardrail or guardrail, it's hard to actually get government to work.
Michael.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that kid in the crib who figures out how to get out.
There's nothing you can do anymore.
Yeah,
he can get out.
He can get out. So you just put him down, and he's going to get out. And that's where Trump is. You can go in and you can say, don't do this, don't go there, don't say that. Don't tell Putin congratulations, whatever. He's going to do whatever he wants to do, because that's where he is viscerally. And so the fact what we're seeing right now, Chuck, is Washington now getting into capitulation mode, where they figure it's easier to give him the runway to do what he wants to do. Just extend the runway as much as possible. So you have the Senate leadership saying, well, Sessions, don't leave until after the election, So it's no longer, we're going to fight for you all the way to the end. You're not going anywhere. Now it's don't leave until after the election.
We were talking this morning. I said, he always tests the electric fence.
That's right.
And he's been testing it on Sessions for 15 months, and he was like, hey, I didn't get buzzed.
Right. And
Lindsey Graham didn't buzz me.
And now it's all, it's all out there. And I think you see Republican after Republican saying, well, Sessions after the election, not even thinking about how they're going to get somebody else confirmed. And now there's talk that maybe the president isn't so interested in having someone confirmed. Maybe he does want to put somebody in who's just a placeholder who could do the job that he
I'm guessing he's not going to let Rod Rosenstein be the acting attorney general. Is that what we think?
We don't
like he's going to find some other loophole to appoint someone else the acting, which I think he can do.
And then there will be nobody standing in the way. And I think the president wants that. Now, then the question is, depending on what happens on November 6th, how much rope he really has.
See, Mark, I think that's ultimately what this is all about. The voters are going to dictate how many guardrails there really are.
Well, and there's actually so much on the line. Not only are they talking about the guardrails, who are the investigators? Is it going to be Democrats or Republicans in charge of the oversight
We're
committee?
voting on the... Right. There it is. We're voting on the investigators. Who do you want to investigate the president?
And who's going to chair the intel committees? Absolutely. All of it's on the table.
Mark and Chuck, I still ask the question, will the president care? And at the end, do you really think, as self-absorbed as he is... Well,
he cares about not being humiliated.
But how he cares about survival and not being humiliated. But how is that defined, given everything else that we've known and seen so far? For any other political trapeze artist, they would have been splat a long time ago. But for him, survival is defined differently, and I think that's what Washington has not been able to adjust to yet.
Well, and he's continued the last several weeks attacking the Mueller investigation, trying to undermine it so that whatever comes out, he then has the ability to still survive that.
You put it best. Finger on and not getting shocked. That's, okay, we'll do more of that.
Yes. Like getting it shocked, and it's like Sessions. Anyway, all right, you got to stick around a competitive race in the most unlikely of places. Oh, I'll finish that in a minute. Welcome back today and Meet the Midterms. Believe it or not, Oklahoma, yes, Oklahoma, is going to have a competitive governor's race this fall. Businessman Kevin Stitt won the Republican runoff last night for Oklahoma governor. He won with a strategy we're seeing in lots of GOP primaries this year by questioning his opponent's loyalty to President Trump. Stitt will face the Democratic nominee Drew Edmondson, the former state attorney general, frankly, and I think he's been in Oklahoma Democratic politics pretty much for a quarter century. At least one poll suggests the race could be close, with the Democrat actually leading a head-to-head matchup with Stitt 40-39. Obviously well within the margin of error. Democrats are hoping to build on voter frustration with budgetary crises under the current Republican governor, which of course led to teacher strikes earlier this year. The outgoing governor, her approval rating is in the single digits in some polls. And it has also helped fuel Democratic upsets in recent special elections for the Oklahoma legislature. So we'll see if Democrats can pull off a win statewide in one of the reddest parts of the country. And we may get an answer to the question of whether it's possible for a Republican candidate to be too conservative for Oklahoma. We'll be right back with more MTP Daily.
I am as impressed as anyone that my opponent brags that she owns over 100 pairs of shoes. I, on the other hand, have over 100 combat missions serving our country.
Time now for the lid. Panel is back. Mark Murray, Donna Edwards, Michael Steele. Mark Murray, that was Martha McSally. She's now the Republican nominee for Arizona Senate. She was referring to her Democratic opponent, the Democratic nominee, Kirsten Sinema there. Boy, is this going to be a nasty race. It actually feels like the George H.W. Bush, Michael Dukakis campaign of 1988. Patriotism, like sort of patriotism, shoes, combat missions. Nothing that has to do with the Senate race.
Well, and on top of that, you and I have been talking about the year of the woman for a very long time, and this is going to be the most high-profile race in the country, pitting a Democratic woman versus a Republican nominee in this race, all in a state in which we talked about Florida for so much of this show, but Arizona is a really important state, not only in competitive governor's race, Senate race, House races, and then when we talked about 2020, it is going to be a presidential battleground.
Donna, the shoe comment. I'm sorry to be asking the one woman on the panel here, but it just seemed like an odd hit.
Well, I think that this race is going to, the way it's going to play out, you've got the two women, but I think there's going to come a point at which they're going to go, this is not about women, and the way that they attack each other may be the way that one wins or loses, because I'm not sure the electorate is quite ready for that kind of fisticuffs from one woman candidate
It becomes
to another
really
woman
personal.
candidate.
You don't think if it gets overly personal you're not quite sure how that plays.
I'm not at all. In fact, I think it could. In fact, I think it could turn off a lot of voters, and so we'll see. We haven't had an opportunity to see that before.
To your point, because this is the sweet spot. I'm watching this race because I want to see if and when they start to campaign like men. Because the public has this general perception of how women candidates act, perform, and campaign. What you saw there in that little shoe comment in the South.
They're almost like what you're saying, more gender neutral now.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see, to your point, how much the pressures and the dynamics of the race really pushes these female candidates to behave or to perform like a traditional candidate.
What I find interesting with McSally, and she's tried this the whole time, and I give her credit for it because you see what she's trying to do. She's trying to tonally embrace the president without substantively embrace the president. Now, I still don't know if you can do that, but I see what she's doing. It could, that is not a bad high wire, at least to try to walk.
It's not, although, again, immigration on a policy level, she has adopted the wall and everything that President Trump has talked about.
Which might be a little too conservative for Arizona. Arizona's not as hard line on some of this stuff as the base is.
And Chuck, still, I think that Senator Jeff Flake, the person who gave up the seat, does matter. And there are Republicans in the state of Arizona who would consider themselves the Chamber of Commerce Republicans in this race. Those are the people that Kyrsten Sinema is going right after. And I think Martha McSally, for her to be able to win, she has to peel the Jeff Flake folks back.
Yeah, her issue is less Trump and more Flake, I think. Yeah.
Right, and look at, Jeff Flake today put out a tweet congratulating both of the candidates. And so he's up for grabs. His people are up for grabs.
All right, I want to bring up, I have to say, I am surprised that the John McCain for Richard Russell switch is not a done deal. I just thought that wouldn't be a very difficult thing, and yet there clearly are Southern Republicans who are afraid of somehow disparaging Richard Russell, Michael Steele.
Well, I would just look at the camera and say to my party, get a spine and do the right thing, because there's no question that embracing a Southern segregationist Democrat, I might remind you.
By the way, this is the Republican Party embracing a Democrat. They love to blame the Democrats for segregation.
And everybody likes to run around and talk about what Democrats did with the KKK and segregationists. Well, here's your chance to put up and shut up. Do the right thing.
Anybody want to add?
Well, and it shouldn't have required trying to trade, a package deal for judges in order to do it. I mean, that was the negotiation. I mean, this is the right thing to do. It's for their former colleague that they've all embraced. Shocking that they're not.
Mark Berry, Chuck Schumer would love to find things that divide the Republican Party. I don't think he intended for this to actually divide the party.
And Chuck, it's just a microcosm.
I don't know. I don't think he actually thought.
But it's a microcosm of the whole Confederate monument debate too, in a lot of ways.
It really is. It really is. I can't believe that the McCain for Richard Russell thing is going to somehow be controversial. The Trump era. Mark, Donna, Michael, thank you very much. Happy day after the last big primary. We'll be right back. Well, that's all for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more MTP Daily.